I'd like to read an opinion piece that was published in April 1983 in the Frogtown Forum neighborhood newspaper. I had resigned as editor of that paper in December of 1982. In April of 1983, I was participating with the Honeywell Project protesting nuclear weapons proliferation. It happens in springtime. Springtime, the season for rejuvenation has begun. But for me, it may have started 100 years ago in 1883, when my great-grandfather Lynch brought his family to Frogtown. I might even say it began further back, or I could say it began later, because my life is a part of so many people's lives, and their lives are a part of mine. We are a chain of lives, and that is what the spirit of life is. 3 incidents last month, March 1983, reinforce my belief in this chain of spirit. Let's say that spirit started in a kitchen on Blair Street, shortly before the turn of the 20th century. According to my granny, my great-grandfather was a dancing man. Her father could soft shoe like no one else. When his family threw a party, they would move aside the old oak table, pull out a jug of wine, play a little music on the piano or accordion, and dance in the kitchen. This man produced a large family, which has maintained its roots in Frogtown. Their names are Lynch, Peck, Spiess, Young Hans, Youngworth, all branching into the hundreds of peoples and names from that man, a janitor, who could soft shoe, leap high, click his heels, and land on the floor as softly as a cat on velvet. We owe our American lives to the loins of that Austrian-Hungarian immigrant, and we party each March. It's quite a party, too. A couple hundred always show up. We'd never fit in the kitchen now. Sometimes somebody can't make it. Other years they do, but others don't. However, there is always plenty of beer and dancing, and most importantly, a lot of conversation and communication. The bonds formed by family traditions continue. Each of us learns again that we are a part of a larger life of spirit. We are the continuation of liveliness. Although each of us is special, we are also a part of other people's special lives, and they are a part of ours, whether we like it or not. We have decided to like it, and therefore the scope of our lives is much larger. My Frogtown-born granny, Tilly, now presides as matriarch. Because I know these things, I am filled with a grand respect for human beings and the spirit of life. Both of my grandmothers have lived through some of the most remarkable changes in the world's history, and they have experienced very heartbreaking and difficult times. Despite their personal struggles and their working-class cultural trials, they thrive and enjoy themselves. How could I not feel good about the possibilities for humankind? Here is another reason for my optimism. Early in the month, I was driving back to St. Paul from Minneapolis and decided to spend my lunch hour along the Mississippi River. The day was gray, and honestly, I was ornery. I walked through the leafless thickets beside the river. A few branches whipped my face. I stumbled on loose rocks and ripped a hole in my pants. I walked beneath the Lake Street Bridge and kept going toward the Ford Bridge until I found a large driftwood log. I sat down to watch the river flow. A Tupperware bowl had washed ashore and sat upturned like a turtle drying on the sand. This is the river where suicide jumpers get stuck in the mud below the bridges. It takes days before their bodies loosen and are found, if ever. This is the river where hundreds of pounds of cyanide have been dumped each day, where sewage and chemical waste tumble in the spiraling river currents. This is the river that runs through the body of our continent. Look at any map, and you will see the great Father of the Waters River begins just to the right of the center of the continent, about where you would see a heart if the continent was a human body. I sat grumpy and sad. Then I stood to return to my car. As I stepped out of a thicket onto a mound of cold, brown beach sand, a large bird glided 30 feet above the water. It immediately saw me and flared, its belly toward me. It was a startled bald eagle. Then it rose, phoenix-like, with its wings spread wide. It flew the way it had come, toward the center of Minneapolis. Imagine a bald eagle in the middle of the Twin Cities. A bald eagle, its species, almost wiped out 20 years ago. Yet, because humans cared enough, it is increasing its numbers. I arrived at my car, thrilled and encouraged. We are a part of the earth. We care and we will carry on. The larger spirit of life is rising again. And this points to the third incident. I am a walker. I walk every day. And for more than 10 years, I walked mostly around Como Lake. On the first day of spring, I met numerous people strolling at Como, deeply breathing the first fresh air of the season. Hundreds of us were out, some walking, some holding hands, some pushing children in little carts, some kissing girlfriends or nuzzling one another under a willow tree. Near the lake's peninsula, below a naked crabapple tree, a large flock of mallards and Canadian honkers squawked and honked as children, adults, grandparents, and toddlers threw bread and corn to the fowl. 10 years ago, this never happened. 10 years ago, the ducks were few. People avoided the park, and we never saw a goose. Now, hundreds of people use the park daily. People and fowl share the space and give pleasure and sustenance to one another. Our people are walking, running, and using the earth more properly on an individual basis. Our wildlife has adapted, and this proves that it is not impossible to live with us. It is not impossible for us to live with the animals. No one will ever convince me that the spirit of life, which I intimately witnessed this March, continues and grows because our civilization has the protection of nuclear bombs. No frightened politician or greedy defense contractor can convince me that the spirit of life depends upon political or mechanical cleverness. And that seems to be all that they have. The spirit does not depend upon the billions of dollars spent on nuclear energy and chemical carcinogens. The spirit of life depends upon the sharing of life and the caring of life. Whether that spirit is in the wonderful dance I had with my pregnant sister, or in the lines of genetic material I share through my grandmother to the man who soft-shoed in his kitchen. Whether that spirit is the breadcrumbs thrown to Canadian geese, or in the stride of my 78-year-old neighbor who walks Como Lake every day of the year. The spirit of life does not need nor depend upon the capability of nuclear destruction. Every day, life is difficult enough. We do not need the idiocy of such cleverness. Bombs can never produce joy or happiness, but jobs can and often do. It is beyond my comprehension how any person with the least bit of respect for the spirit of life can feel safe because of nuclear weapons. I'm willing to bet the people who do feel safer have little, or at best only a narrow understanding of family ties, of family chains, of the spirit of family. And I wonder if they have ever marveled as a bald eagle rose in the wet heart of this city.